Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for the support. On my channel, I like to give my opinion and perspective on things that are happening today, things that I think actually matter to everyday people, especially those of us trying to raise kids in the insanity known as today's society. I do like to talk about current events and politics, so please like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and share it with others. Also, be sure you are subscribed. Help me to grow this channel and hopefully reach more people that value logic, reason, and sanity. Also, be sure to find me on Rumble under Outspoken Samantha in the event that YouTube decides I have violated their community standards and chooses to kick me off their platform forever. That being said, let's get into today's topic. I want to revisit the situation that is going on in East Palestine, Ohio, because as much as the media and the current administration is trying to ignore this issue and pass off the responsibility to anybody but themselves, we cannot forget these people, and we cannot let this story disappear from the media and disappear from our view. These are our fellow Americans. These are our friends and our neighbors. These are families. And it has always been my belief, and I still believe now more than ever, that people care so much more about other people than government ever will. No matter who's in charge, no matter who's in the presidency, no matter what party is in control at that time, it is always people that are going to care so much more about their fellow friends and neighbors and, the people around them than any government agency ever will. And I think that that has not been more obvious than in any other circumstance that we have seen than it is right now. Biden has not made a trip down to East Palestine, Ohio. Pete Buttigieg has kept out of it. He didn't even say anything about it for 10 days. He just recently did make a visit, but it was only a day after Trump decided to visit, and literally the only response that we have seen from them is when they have been forced to talk about it, which is extremely disheartening. And I don't care who's in charge, if that is your response to the people that you are elected to serve, then you really shouldn't be in office at all. And they've let the EPA completely take the reins on this issue, and that hasn't instilled any more confidence in people, because the people that are supposed to be experts have been telling people, even just days after one of the biggest chemical disasters of our nation's history, just a couple days later, they're saying, it's fine, the air's fine, the water's fine, ignore the dead fish, ignore the dead animals, we're taking care of it, just ignore that humongous slow burn of chemicals that is happening essentially in your backyard. Ignore the chlorine smell that is permeating all of the air around you, and the fact that people, hundreds of miles away are complaining about the effects of this. Just ignore all that. Things are fine. And by the way, about that slow burn.
You were the guy that made all the decisions. Would you have got a controlled burn?
Well, there's the lie. It wasn't a controlled burn, it was an uncontrolled burn. See, I'm a chemical engineer as well as a top health and safety guy. I've got undergraduate and graduate degrees in chemical engineering.
You're the first actual expert that we've gotten to speak to. In your opinion, why do you believe that it was an uncontrolled burn? Why are you using that terminology when so far everywhere else we've seen that it was a controlled burn?
You could go to a place called West Liverpool downriver, and that's where they burn hazardous waste. And in a hazardous waste situation, they very carefully control the temperature and the amount of oxygen so that they get complete combustion, right? It's time, temperature, and amount of the air-fuel ratio. There's no controlling of the amount of air that gets in there. That's why you saw all that soot. So it's not a controlled burn, because a controlled burn would have to be like in a furnace or in your car or some system where you control the fuel, in other words, the vinyl chloride and the amount of oxygen. So they didn't do that. So it's an uncontrolled burn. One of the worst ways to determine exposure in general is to smell it, because if you smell the odor, guess what? You're already exposed, right?
And how long have you been doing this?
30 years. I'm in most of the big named lawsuits as an exposure expert. It's a privilege. I get called in to try to figure some of this stuff out. So that's my job always, is what really happened,
And in my last video where I talked about East Palestine, I inserted a clip of a TikToker named Nick Strom, who essentially breaks down the chemicals that were released in this particular explosion and what the impact is, the amount, and he is what I would call an expert in this field, and he breaks things down so that those of us that aren't experts can understand it. But he, in this next video that I found of his, an updated one, he talked about the chemicals and the impact and the hazards that I feel have been truly ignored because I haven't heard about these things anywhere. So let's have a listen to that.
One of the craziest things to me is that for the past 2 weeks, I have been on the front of everything related to the East Palestine crash. I was the first one to call out that we are not being told the truth here. And now I have all these people who've been following this for like a couple days who believe that the government got to me because I'm saying vinyl chloride is not an issue. Or at least it's not the biggest issue that we have at play now. And honestly, we are at a point of complexity in the situation now that if you do not have at least a couple years of university education in physics and chemistry, you're probably going to get a lot of stuff wrong when you're covering this. The documents being released by the Ohio EPA, the federal government, and the railroad are not meant to be understandable by lay people. So when you're seeing people reading documents that they don't know how to read, it's easy to understand why people are getting so many things wrong. Now, I'm not saying that vinyl chloride was not a big deal. It was a huge deal. But the thing is now, we have bigger deals. There was at least 60,000 gallons of oil. This isn't crude oil. We actually are pretty good at cleaning up crude oil. This is a refined lubricant product. Most petroleum lubricants have a lot of additives put in them, and they're often proprietary chemicals that have never been studied. This is why I think it's so insane that everyone's so focused on vinyl chloride. Right now, we have zero indication that vinyl chloride is a present issue. We have zero indication that hydrogen chloride and phosgene are a present issue. We don't have any indication that dioxins are not a present issue. And we have a lot of evidence through both what the EPA has said and what the railroad has said that they buried a ton of toxic, poisonous oil in the ground to open the railroad. The thing is, the railroad probably loves that you're talking about vinyl chloride because they know that they can prove that there isn't any vinyl chloride. By obsessing over vinyl chloride and phosgene and all the over-sensationalization of all of that stuff, you guys are missing out that they buried poison. You have to understand, unlike vinyl chloride and phosgene that want to break down in our atmosphere, there are potentially chemicals in this oil that's been buried in the ground that are going to last there for longer than any of us will be alive. These chemicals could continue to leach into the water table for decades.
I think in most reports that we were initially hearing about East Palestine, there was a lot of talk of this vinyl chloride. And that's not to say that it's not a concern, because clearly it is, because all of this stuff was just burned into the air. And we just heard from an expert that there's no way for this to have been a controlled burn. Now we're talking about all of this oil that was released into the ground that has been seeping into the soil, and that the train track was just essentially built back over top of it. And I'm sure you've seen on social media the people posting videos of being in the area of East Palestine and dragging sticks through the water or throwing rocks in the water. And once you do that, you disturb all of the chemicals that are on the bottom of those waterways, and you can see them rise to the top, and it leaves like that rainbow colored sheen across the top that is usually associated with oil. And to me, that explains what we're seeing.
Wow.
Look at all that.
Look at it.
It's all in the bottom of the creek bed.
I don't think you'll see this in the camera, but watch this. Just see that chemical pop out of the creek. This is disgusting.
So again, I have a question. Does any of that look safe to you? If the EPA showed up at your door, or any agency, just days after this happening, or even a couple of weeks after this happening, and said the water's fine and the air is fine, would you believe them? Even if they did this.
Right. I'll tell you, we believe in science, so we don't feel like we're being your guinea pig, but we don't mind proving to you that we believe the water's safe.
Okay.
Here's to Caroline.
I appreciate that.
Here's to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome.
That's good. That's really cold coming from that.
Deep water.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's not my water, but
To me, that is one of the most bizarre stunts I have ever seen. That's Governor DeWine. That is the chief of the EPA, Michael Regan, I believe his name is. And I'm not sure who the other gentleman was, but they just come to this woman's house and set up an interview and say, hey, we'll drink the water. We will show everybody that it is totally fine. But even just looking at them, it looks like they cannot wait to put those glasses of water down. They take a sip, they take, a couple little gulps of it, and they cannot put those glasses down fast enough. And even if someone showed up my house to do that, this is not just about a couple of sips here and there. Is this water something that you would cook with? Would you bathe with it? Would you wash your kids with it? Would you do laundry with it? Would you do all of the things that you use water for and feel completely comfortable doing so? Because I know I wouldn't. I'd be like, I don't care. You can drink as much as you want and put yourself at risk as much as you want. I don't feel safe. I don't think that this is a good idea. I came across this post from this guy. His name is Steven Donziger, and he has a lot of experience in this area, and he talked about just kind of the lack of responsibility and the recklessness of Governor DeWine and the chief of the EPA doing this. And I'm going to read this to you because I thought it was really interesting. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and others make home visits in East Palestine to drink the tap water. It says, the stunt by Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and EPA Chief Michael Regan is incredibly reckless. Drinking unsafe tap water in East Palestine after the detonation of cancer-causing chemicals in the community sends exactly the wrong message to local residents. These officials should do their jobs properly and distribute bottled water instead. The EPA clearly is managing this man-made disaster as a public relations challenge rather than the public health crisis that it is. The agency has yet to test for poisonous dioxins and deadly phosgene gas released by the deliberate detonation by the railway company of more than 1 million pounds of cancer-causing chemicals just days after the derailment. The EPA still hasn't independently tested the municipal water supply, according to an investigative report in the Huffington Post. It has been using lab results from tainted samples funded by the rail company that caused the disaster. There is simply no way to know based on available science if the tap water is safe. Further, these guys skip town after one sip while local residents have no choice but to stay. EPA Chief Regan has a policy history of addressing environmental racism, but his latest behavior in Ohio is deeply concerning. The leader of a government agency whose mission is to protect public health should not be doing PR for the polluter he is supposed to be regulating. Instead of drinking tap water to create the fake appearance of safety, do the necessary independent testing to determine the real danger based on science, and order your staff to come up with a comprehensive remediation plan for the affected communities throughout the region, rather than relying on the railway company to do the cleanup. Norfolk Southern's main focus was to get the railway open so profits can flow. It even laid down new track without first cleaning the contaminated soil. It's not too late to fix this, but we need leadership that has the experience, expertise, and willpower to do it. So he's confirming a lot of things that I've been saying and a lot of things that other people have been saying, and you don't have to be an expert to understand what is happening here and to see the shady motives of the people that are giving you this advice that things are safe, that it's fine, and to also recognize that it's all fine and dandy to show up and sip the water, but it's completely dismissive of the fact that these residents cannot leave. They have no choice but to stay, and they are the ones that are going to be using this water for literally everything going on in their life. And I guarantee that not one of these people that just stood in her kitchen for this PR moment would feel comfortable doing those things. The fact that this is being ignored and downplayed should honestly infuriate everyone on both sides. It is not a political thing. This is the fact that this disaster has happened and the response has been egregious. And they also think that we're going to take this blame of the previous administration as an acceptable answer to the problem that people are having now.
For this investigation and for this derailment, ECP brakes would not have prevented the derailment. The wheel bearing failed on car number 23. So even with ECP brakes, the derailment would have occurred, the fire would have ensued, and the 5 vinyl chloride tank cars would still have to be vented and burned.
I can't even imagine being in this position, to have something just completely come out of nowhere and change your life forever. And, to be somebody, as my family is, that does not have a huge savings account, that is not capable, to go out and just completely build from the ground up somewhere else, to just leave everything behind and start over somewhere else. That is not a luxury that most of America has, especially right now when everything is draining our savings accounts, when the cost of everything is skyrocketing. It's almost impossible to survive where you are at, let alone to be in a position where you have to leave everything that you have where it is, just drop it and go. So this is what leads me to the absolutely egregious and soulless, heartless, disgusting comments from Joy Behar that she issued on The View this week. This woman is atrocious. She has no soul. She has no heart. And we certainly know that she has no brain. But on The View this week, she made comments essentially saying that the residents of East Palestine deserved what happened because they voted for Trump.
I don't know why they would ever vote for him, for somebody who, by the way, he placed someone with deep ties to the chemical industry in charge of the EPA's Chemical Safety Office. That's who you voted for in that district. Donald Trump, who reduces all safety. He did.
You can hear the audible gasp from the audience, and you know that if you can make the audience of something like The View sit back in shock, that what you've said is probably the worst of the worst. I can't believe that this show is allowed to still be on air. I can't believe that people like Joy Behar are still allowed to have a platform. But she's not only speaking for herself. I truly believe that a lot of the things that she says, she speaks for the rest of the elites, because they don't care about everyday Americans. They don't care about our struggles, and they don't have to care because these things don't affect them. They're not going to be forced to drink chemically tainted water. They are not ever going to be in a position where they have to pick up and leave and have to wonder how they're going to survive. They're never going to be in a position where they have to choose to live in a harmful area or leave everything behind and attempt to start over someplace that's hopefully safer. They're never going to face these things, so they don't have to care, and they can get away with making these absolutely callous and disgusting comments. But honestly, I am not sure that we really want to get into a game of who has to live with the consequences of who you vote for and whether or not they deserve it, because I'm not as you can probably tell, Joy hasn't spent a lot of time venturing out into any of these cities that have been absolutely leveled into looking like third world countries, and even if she did, she'd probably pretend it wasn't happening. That is how soulless and clueless and detached from humanity this person is. But I have to wonder, has she seen any of these cities lately? San Francisco looks like a third world country. Chicago is rife with gang violence, while Mayor Lightfoot creates TikTok dances in the middle of the street. New York is overrun with crime. Los Angeles, Portland, Houston, St. Louis, Pittsburgh. All of these cities used to be worth visiting. They used to be worth living in. But now there are people openly suffering on the streets, laying in their own vomit and feces, completely succumbed to drug addiction with no hope for recovery. Innocent people and children are dying at the hands of gangs and crimes every single day. It's becoming harder for people to afford food, to afford rent, to afford groceries. And these are all due to leftist policies and leftist DAs that are soft on crime. They are letting people off without being charged, or essentially with a slap on the wrist, and everyday people are having to deal with the consequences of it. And it is not even my personal belief that when I see these people suffering on the street, when I see these homeless camps, when I see, someone who's drug addicted, completely out of their mind, wandering up and down the road, just wondering where they are, that's someone's family member, that's someone's brother or dad or mother or sister or cousin, and nobody deserves to suffer like that. I do wish people that vote for the people that cause these things would wake up and realize that, as you can see by evidence of the things that they're passing and the actions that they take and the results of what is happening to innocent people, I wish they would look at that and realize these people really don't care about me. But that's not to say that I think that innocent people deserve to suffer. But if you want to talk about the person that you voted for, Joy, this massive disaster plunges thousands of Americans into utter devastation, and the current president not only can't even be bothered to address it, he goes to Ukraine and pledges billions more of our taxpayer dollars to help fund their people, to help protect their people, to help keep their people safe, and even to cover their pensions. So That's who you voted for, Joy Behar, a guy who will willingly leave his own people to suffer, who will give millions in funding to another country while leaving their own citizens to fend for themselves. And who says, and he gets on TV and says that nobody's questioning where this money is going and that everybody supports what he is doing in sending our money to Ukraine. But again, that's who you voted for. We can look at regulations. We can look at what happened to cause this accident and hopefully be willing to correct it. I do have to wonder, though, that if this was such a big deal to the Biden administration and to the guy that you voted for, amongst his 100+ executive orders that he signed on his first day in office, if this was such a big deal, you have to wonder why he didn't sign an executive order improving the regulation for trains and transportation and infrastructure. Not to mention, speaking of infrastructure, didn't y'all just pass like a $1.3 trillion infrastructure bill promising that this is the exact problem that it was meant to address? That is why people put you in office, because they truly think that you have their best interests at heart. So none of what this woman says ever has any legitimacy to it. She is absolutely insane. She belongs in an asylum, and I have no apologies for saying that because I truly believe it. But what's been so uplifting for me to see is just how communities have come together surrounding this issue. I have seen video after video of people just dropping everything that they have and bringing water and supplies to the people of East Palestine. And it always fascinates me because I still see people primarily on the left saying, society doesn't care about the poor, society doesn't care about people that are struggling, or, this is why capitalism sucks and we need more, we need socialism, we need more government programs, all while watching the government completely ignore this issue, and the agencies that they are funding are misleading people about whether or not it's safe to even be in this area, while watching everyday people be the ones who actually care. Because if you look, who are the ones that are trying to bring attention to this issue? Who are the ones that are continuing to talk about it and to make it public and to spread awareness? Because it's not the media, it's not the government, it's not these government agencies, it's everyday people. I've also been watching a East Palestine Facebook group and just kind of watching the posts from people saying, what people really think. Is it really this portrayal from the media that people don't care that our government is sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and they don't care that it's not going to American citizens that are struggling? Or is it a completely different narrative? And generally it is completely different. What the media reports on, what the government is saying is completely incorrect. People do care, but it's been amazing to see, people posting in there saying, I have, room in my home to take in a family or to take in, children, or, if you need help with your pets. I have so many people just willing to share what it is they have, even if it's not much, to take care of their fellow Americans, to take care of communities that are hurt. And, if nothing else, people offering to, send resources or to send money or to just offer prayers to people and just let them know that they haven't been forgotten and that they are being thought of, and that, people are watching their struggles and that we do care about them. So please like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments below, or share any other updates that you've heard, or perhaps things that you think are not being talked about enough. I do try and share a perspective on things that I don't feel like is being echoed from everybody, or I try to add to the conversation. So again, I really do appreciate you guys being here. Hit the notification bell so you can be notified every time I post a video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.